All right, so we're just going to review the genetic disorder PKU, which is the amino acid called phenylalanine. This is where the client cannot break down this essential amino acid. It's genetic, which means it's passed on through their genes. And so what ends up happening is since they cannot break it down, it builds up in their bloodstream and causes problems. So we talked earlier about how pregnant women cannot consume aspartame because it contains this essential amino acid because the infant might, or the fetus in this case, sorry, might have PKU. If the baby is born with PKU, then you're going to see things like we're going to put them on a low phenylalanine formula, we're going to limit their protein intake, and we're going to need to do a lifelong avoidance of this spartamine and of the phenylalanine because they cannot break it down. All right, so this week the chaining concept here is going to, or excuse me, the positive nutrition lifestyle concept is going to be chaining. This is where we put two behaviors together. So, for example, who here doesn't think of French fries when they have a burger? Those things we've kind of chained together as a society as two foods that go together all the time. So we can use this also in a positive way, such as chaining things like always having a milk at dinner. We've chained a meal and 1% milk as a healthy lifestyle change to increase our calcium and our milk consumption. We can also do that with things like when you study. Whenever you study, you always have a handful of nuts as a healthy, positive lifestyle. You can also mix two foods together. So whenever you have a sandwich, you now have a serving of fruit. That's a good way to also chain those two foods together. All right, on to vitamins because they are vital. You can see right there's the definition. I'm not going to read it back to you. We've already discussed what essential means. So all vitamins except for vitamin D are essential, which means we therefore must be supplied through our diet. There's also a vast improvement over consuming it in our food versus in a pill. Nothing that can be synthesized is going to be the same as the fruit or the vegetable itself. There's always going to be things missing, so it's always better to get it through our food. So vitamins, we have deficiencies that come up once again. So we have a primary deficiency, which how does that occur? So as you can see, that is when you're not, or if you recall, that is where you're not consuming enough of the nutrient that you needed. So you're not eating it to meet your needs. So if you need 1,000 milligrams of calcium, you only eat 840 milligrams, you have a primary deficiency of calcium. Now, on the other hand, let's say you consume 1,000 milligrams, which is what the RDA is for you of calcium, and you still, get osteoporosis or, have some other sort of impairment, then we need to look and see is it that you're excessively excreting it? So maybe there's something wrong with the kidneys, or there's some impairment with your absorption, so it's not able to pass through the intestinal mucosa. We'll talk about calcium specifically in a little bit. So again, bioavailability becomes very prevalent here. So with vitamins, and we're going to talk about minerals, the rate and extent of absorption is very important. Right here you can see what the two types of vitamins are. There's water and fat soluble, and what the two different do. I'm not going to read this slide to you. All right, the B vitamins. So we're going to talk about them just in a generality. They really act as a coenzyme, and they help with your general metabolism. So a lot of times you see in energy drinks, they'll say that they have a whole bunch of B vitamins because B vitamins do help with your general metabolism, but again, they can't actually create a metabolism that's there because that's not there. They're acting as coenzymes. They help assist with it. All right, so the first one, all these you can see here, I'm not going to fill anything out here because hopefully what you're seeing, all these things right here are exactly what you did in study group. So if you have any questions about a specific, I'm more than willing to answer it for you, but I really would bring this back to your study group and make sure that you're getting those filled out correctly. So you can see there's one for B12, folic acid, vitamin C, vitamin A, D, E, K. Last concept here for the chapter is the concept of social interaction. So definitely social interaction can definitely have a positive influence on nutrition, especially if you think, for example, like the Meals on Wheels program. So somebody who's homebound is going to have some food insecurity. They're not going to have it. It's not going to be very easy for them to get their food sources. So go to the grocery store, do shopping if they're homebound. So programs like a Meals on Wheels also includes social interaction, because sometimes it's not just an issue of access, but also, you know, of social interaction. So I see that in hospitalized patients, when you're sitting in your room by yourself eating, 3 meals a day, the food consumption tends to go down. But, then you go out with your friends and you're laughing, you're having a good time, and all of a sudden you don't even know where all the food went. Next, we're going to talk about is water and minerals. You can see right here is those 5 dimensions of wellness. Water, very important, needed to survive, will not survive more than a couple days without it. And so you can see right here some of the functions. It helps keep your cells working. It helps carry away excess solutes, etc. Let's see. The fluid is where you're going to have chemical reactions, transmission of nerves, impulses, and that's about it. So the adequate intake of water here, as we can see, is going to be, in addition to fluids that are in our foods, we need at least 4 cups a day for an adequate intake of water. For males, actually, the recommended daily intake is going to be 13 cups. For females, it's going to be 9 cups. Things like coffee, tea, alcohol, and soft drinks are not considered primary sources of water, because they actually act as diuretics, and so they tend to have a net loss of fluid when it's all said and done. So it's really important to know what are some food sources of water, because the example I always use is, we had a patient at the VA during clinicals who the student went to go bring in the water like you do every morning, and the patient said, you can throw that right in the trash. I don't drink a sip of water. I haven't done it in the last 20 years. You're not going to change that on me. So it's like, well, great. This is really means then we got to make sure that we're giving him milk, some broth, soup, some fruit juices, fruits and vegetables, to make sure that he's getting in enough water, because he might not drink it in the liquid form, but he needs it to survive. So making sure you understand what are some good food sources, like the fruits and vegetables that have higher concentration. So things like watermelon, grapes, oranges, lettuce, tomatoes, zucchinis, all examples. It's on page 156, I believe, in your book. Gives you the water content of lots of different fruits and vegetables. Water quality, very important to know. So we have 2 types. There's this stuff called hard water. It's going to have high amount of minerals such as calcium and magnesium. Drinking this type of water can actually provide a significant amount of these nutrients. Then we also have soft water. This is where it's actually going to have high amounts of sodium, because what we actually do is add sodium chloride to the water to soften it up. This can be a problem for people who are sodium sensitive. So when I worked in an assisted living, they had soft water throughout the building, but then they had one faucet on the main floor that had non-softened water, and a lot of residents would come down and fill up their water jugs because they did not want to get their sodium from their water consumption. And I tend to agree with them, because if I only can have so much sodium, I want to definitely save my salt for my food and not get it in my water. Contamination. So we talked about food safety. Now we're talking about water safety. Very important, because things like lead pipes, especially in older buildings, can cause developmental or cognitive impairment. So even a little ability or a bit present. So for example, if it's greater than 15 parts per billion of lead in the water when it's tested, then pregnant women, infant, and children are actually advised to drink bottled water. So what are some ways that that we can try to eliminate the lead in the pipes if we don't have the ability to move out of the apartment or change to non-lead pipes? So you probably said that we can help reduce the lead in the water by running the water for at least 2 minutes when it's been standing in the pipes. That way it hasn't been sitting there absorbing the lead for maybe hours or more. The other thing too is to use cold water for drinking and cooking, because it's going to absorb less lead than hot or warm water. Another type of contamination can be through industrial pollution, bacterial, carcinogens, drugs. I mean, just less than 10 years ago, it was standard practice to get rid of the drugs. We flushed them down the toilet. We put them down the sink. Now we actually collect them in black boxes on the unit to prevent the drugs in our water system because water has been tested and there's lots of estrogens in there. And it can even be, we've stopped that, but even things like, when you and I urinate, there's going to be remnants of the drug if it's excreted through our urine that's going to get into the waterways. And so we've seen, animals, having, especially like estrogen, for example, is a classic case where we're starting to see, the feminization of animals or having both genitalia because of the high amounts of estrogen in the water. Another really important thing to know about is called fracking, and I think it's important to know as an American. It's not a new practice, but it's something that we've dramatically increased our use of, and it can have some devastating effects on water. I was going to have a video here to show you. I'm not going to click on it, but if you don't know what fracking is or you haven't seen it before, I strongly encourage you to Google it and use a reliable source. Like here I use CBS News to learn some more about it because it's something that once this water is bad, it's not going to be able to be cleaned. So something we have to think about with our patient population, especially like in this area, for example, is well water or spring or surface water. That is going to be at higher risk because it's not being tested as often, so it may exceed the EPA recommendation. So for example, my parents, I both have well water, and I don't know the last time either one of us has checked or tested our water. Whereas if we were using, the bubbler here on campus for our water, that's being tested on a daily, if not hourly basis because, if there is contaminants in that water, it's going to affect a large amount of people. If some of you might remember in 1992, I believe, with the cryptosporidium, that ended up getting to a lot of people. And so that's why the water, when we have city water needs to be tightly regulated and tested frequently because it's going to affect a lot of people. Whereas if my water all of a sudden became contaminated with the residuals of fracking, for example, it's going to affect me and anybody else who drinks my water or that community. But it's not going, it depends on, what water source is being contaminated. The contaminant levels are set by the EPA. All right, water safety. So the big controversy over bottled water or tap water. If you haven't heard this before, it's a really important thing to think about. Bottled water, number one, is not always cleaner or safer. Sometimes if you look at the label, it's actually just tap water. So like Michigan tap water, for example, has, like that's what at least Walmart used to use in their water. So you were literally just buying to have tap water that's been bottled. So it's also regulated by the FDA. It's not as tightly regulated as tap water, as like I just mentioned about tap water being tested very, very frequently, and it costs extensively more expensive, not only for yourself but also to the environment. Those bottles cannot be used. If you look at the bottom, it has the number 1 on it. That really means one use only. Things like leaving it in the car or washing those bottles, the heat will actually start to damage the containers and part of the plastic can start to leach into the water. Some people do say they taste better, and sometimes it's more of a convenience factor and is a way to increase total water consumption. But tap water is much safer. It contains fluoride when you're talking about city water, which is going to help with the strong teeth and prevent tooth decay. And then you can use all those, bottles you see can be reused, cleaned, and used again. All right, what are the roles of water? So water is in our intracellular and our extracellular cells. So intra means within and extra means between the cells. So you can see the vast majority of our water is going to be inside the cell versus outside here in your blood vessels or between these cells here. Then digestion. So water cannot be digested, so it quickly passes through the intestinal mucosa. Where is most of the water absorbed? Small intestine, very good. Water is a major component of our blood, our lymph, our saliva, and our urine. And we need to make sure we're balancing intake with output. If we don't balance it, there's going to be either, too much and then causing edema or dehydration. This is part 1.